we introduced a chakira called din kloli, din misuyo. So we wanted to know whether or not the requirement of preparing for a mitzvah before the Zman is that inherent in the mitzvah itself, or is it something external? It's a chiyuv unto itself. And that's called a din kloli, that the Torah says, serve Hashem, fulfill his mitzvot, and therefore you have to do everything in your power to fulfill those mitzvot. So, for example, if you have to relocate yourself before Rosh Hashanah in order to hear shofar, is that part of the mitzvah of shofar? And that's a din mesuyam? Or do we say no? It's a din kloli, it applies to all mitzvot. So if you take a look at the Minchas Asher, and specifically you want to look on the left column, you'll see where he says, Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the top of the left column, L'zakos es Yisrael, God wanted to give Jewish people merit, Lefichach, and therefore here b'lehem Torah mitzvahs. He gave them 613 mitzvahs. He says the following: if God gave us 613 mitzvahs, and these are commands and obligations, then it goes without saying I have to do everything in my power to fulfill those obligations. V'nireh diyesh lilmod halacha pshuta zu min ha-mitzvah ha-klos. Do you see that word close? You want to underline that word. You see that it's a general obligation that applies to the Jew to guarantee that he fulfills all the mitzvahs. And the Torah commands us, well, you have to learn the mitzvahs, so that you'll fulfill the mitzvahs. And then he says the following. This is fascinating. You know, the Rambam counted 613, but before he did that, he gave what's called shroshim. Shroshim literally means the laws or the roots. And one of the shroshim of the Rambam says that if you have a mitzvah close that applies in general, you don't count it in Taryah. So, for example, the Rambam says, the Torah says, "V'avadetem es Hashem Elokechem," you should serve your God. That's not going to be counted as a mitzvah, because that's a general mitzvah. So, if Weiss says that all those general mitzvahs really command you to prepare for the mitzvah before the time period. So, if I have to buy a lulav, it's because of this general command, which is called a mitzvah close. So it's not part of the mitzvah of lulav. The mitzvah of lulav is going to emerge when? Only on Sukkot. But before Sukkot, I have this general command that sort of encompasses all the Taryag mitzvot, namely to do whatever I have to do in order to guarantee that when the time comes, I'll be able to fulfill the mitzvah. Everybody have that? And not only that, he says, if we look in our parsha, the Torah has what's called arur. Are you familiar with that? There's a whole list of brachot and klalot, and the curses are called arur. And one of them is arur asher lo yakim et divrei Torah hazor. Who is cursed? He who will not fulfill this Torah. Which Torah? The entire Torah, the whole corpus, the whole body of the Torah. It's all included under this general command of Orah Shel Yokim as Divrei Torah Zos. So let me ask you a question. If a person fails to locate himself where he can hear the shofar, fails to buy a lulav, listen carefully to my question. Is that called a bittul mitzvah of shofar? A bittul mitzvah of sukkah, of lulav? What's the answer? No, it's not. No, because again, it's not part of the mitzvah itself. It's a general obligation. So if you want to tell me that a person did not prepare for the mitzvah beforehand, and therefore he was incapable of fulfilling that mitzvah, the answer is that he is guilty of Orah Asher Lo Yokim Es HaTorah Azos, of a general command to fulfill God's mitzvahs. So it seems to my mind that what he's saying is that every day of the year, I have to worry about any number of mitzvahs, whatever I have to worry about. If let's say I know that my tzitzis are not, in order, I have to worry about buying another pair of tzitzis. My tefillin have to be checked. I got to worry about preparing my tefillin. If it's a month before Pesach, I got to make sure that I can bake matzahs on top. Anything in the whole year, now the whole year encompasses this general mitzvah. So I want to introduce a two-word phrase here, which is going to come up over and over again. If you want to write this down, it's called a svara d'oraita. But what does d'oraita mean?
From the Torah.
From the Torah. Svara, what does svara mean? It's kind of a logic. The Torah has its own logical system. It's not exactly the same as, logic if you take logic in college. Right? I once picked up a textbook from Princeton University on logic. I didn't understand one word. It was all symbols, mathematically simple. So I'm not going to encourage you to take logic in college. Very different. You need a couple of introductory courses. But the logic of the Torah is a very unique logic. It has its own mechanism. For example, if you've ever heard of a kal vachomer, kal vachomer works in a very specific way. There are rules and regulations that govern a kal vachomer. It's not purely logic. I mean, obviously, logic plays a role. So that's called, in the language of Chazal, a svara. You want to write that down? Svara. Samach bet reish al. Now, what Rav Weiss is claiming, although he doesn't use this terminology, is that there's a svara d'oraisa. That means we can operate with svara and come up with a Torah, a biblical obligation. And that biblical obligation is to guarantee that I can fulfill the mitzvah in its time. And that's derived from what pasuk? Not from any specific pasuk. It's a svara d'oraita. I'll give you another example of a svara that's not included under any particular mitzvah. Tell me, which mitzvah obligates me to believe in God? Of the 613.
Yeah.
So the Bahag says, no, V'yahavta means to love God, but we're not even up to that. We first have to believe in God. So the Bahag says that the concept of a mitzvah means a mitzvah. What's a mitzvah? A commander. If you're saying there's a commander, I'm sorry, start again, my mistake. A mitzvah means a command. But if you postulate there's a command, then what do you have to assume? Commander. That there's a commander. So therefore the whole Torah is built on the belief in God. Because if you don't believe in God, then all the Torah, all the mitzvahs are meaningless. Because how can you have a command without a command? Do you understand that? That's called the svara d'oraita. A logical conclusion about my obligation that's not even written in the Torah. In other words, you can't pin it on any particular mitzvah. If I was counting Taryag mitzvahs, the Bahad claims I would not include the belief in God in any of the mitzvahs. But the premise on which all of the mitzvahs is predicated is the belief in God. So I have to believe in God because otherwise I can't have mitzvahs. And that's called the svara d'oraita. Very unique kind of idea. By the way, I took some wood. Okay. So what do we have so far? We have, number one, a mitzvah clause, a general mitzvah that's not part of the mitzvah itself. And if I violate this general mitzvah, I'm not considered a bittul essay. And we have a concept called svara d'oraita. Okay. Next, take a look at the bottom of this page. And here's the question. And again, we're going to have a chakira. Let's say Second, let's just get the calculation. Yeah. It's called Kol Hamoed Sukkot. Now, again, there are different customs, but I'm going to take a little vote here. Do you gentlemen wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed? You do. Anybody else? Yeah. Oh wow.
I do without a problem.
Okay, a lot more than I thought. Yeah. I was once down in Miami Beach, in North Miami Beach. There, they won't let you daven for the Ovid on Chol Hamoed unless you're wearing tefillin.
Oh, wow.
I never in my life wore tefillin on Chol Hamoed, so no one in Israel wears tefillin on Chol Hamoed. By the way, those of you who wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed, don't do it in Israel. Do me a favor. I once saw somebody showed up with tefillin in his shul on Chol Hamoed. They almost wrapped his neck around with the tefillin. I mean, I tell you, you can't imagine how angry they were. You just, it totally unacceptable. Not for Sephardim, not for Ashkenazim, not for Hasidim. Nobody wears tefillin here in Chol Hamoed. Anyway, I'm sure the Rosh Yeshiva will give you a shear on that. But, so here's my question. You have to buy either a lulav or tefillin, and you have limited funds. What kind of issue now comes up when you have limited funds?
Which
one do you get?
Which one comes first? That's called, and I want you to write this down, Kidima. Kuf Dalid Yud Mem He. That's in Ashkenazis, and in Sfaradit you call it Kidima. So there's a whole, how should I say, a whole area of halacha, broad area of halacha that deals with Kidima. For example, I told you I'm researching Kiddush now, and what happens on Shabbos Chanukah? I only have enough money to either buy Ner Chanukah or to buy Yain for Kiddush. Which comes first? Do you follow what I mean? That's called Kidima. So let me ask you a question. What are two possibilities as to whether you should buy tefillin or buy a lulav on Chol Hamoed? Two definitions.
Well, like the cases that I'll think of is tefillin you put on daily, so you want to buy something that will last longer if you're limited funds. But lulav is more of a once in a while type mitzvah, so it could be considered more special or more rare. So people might spend their money.
Very nice logic. Yeah, good.
Well, I have to agree with him. Like the case about tefillin, Tadi Rishon and Tadi put down. So I would say because you're going to put on tefillin more often, that you should.
But what's inside to say I should buy the lulav and not the tefillin?
More kaddish.
Lulav is more kaddish than tefillin. No, tefillin is more kaddish than lulav. That I can promise.
Just by saying like it's on Yantiv.
That's what you buy kaddish. Well, maybe it's just a language communication. Yeah, what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Tefillin you can borrow, but a lulav you have to own. So
not during Chol Hamoed. The tefillin you have to own only on the first day. We're in Chol Hamoed.
Oh, we're in Chol Hamoed.
I can borrow your lulav.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say similar. I was going to say actually either of them we could borrow, and we're also supposed to get like the nicest.
Wait a minute, gentlemen. We're going off on a tangent, though. You're not following my logic. Again, we've been talking about the following issue. When does the mitzvah begin? Does it begin after the Zman HaChiyuv, or does it begin even before the Zman HaChiyuv? Tell me, if I have a choice between lulav and I don't, and tefillin, I don't wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed, what should be the svara to say that I buy the lulav, even though tefillin has great kedusha?
Well, if you're going to argue that the Zman HaChiyuv begins before the mitzvah, wouldn't that sway the scale way in favor of the tefillin because you're going to be
correct? So we're looking for an explanation for why you would buy the lulav.
No, I got you.
And not the tefillin.
Because you have chag at the end. You have to shigula for, but you don't have it. But for tefillin, it's going to be more days until then.
More time.
I'm trying to figure out where I lost you guys. Again, we're asking whether or not there's a Zman Chiyuv before the Zman Chiyuv, correct? That's what we discussed for the last 2 days. In a choice between tefillin on Chol Hamoed, which we don't wear on Chol Hamoed, we talk about that, and lulav, which we take on Chol Hamoed, why would I therefore give lulav kedima?
So because the only thing that's making you buy tefillin is the din klali saying you have to do the mitzvah because the rule of tefillin doesn't apply yet. but you have the same din klali also that applies to lulav. So,
But what do I
in
have?
addition, you have
That's what I'm looking for.
Right,
What do I
in
have in
addition, you
lulav
have
that I
the
don't
actual
have in
mitzvah of
tefillin?
the actual.
I have the Zman Achiyu. So in this essay over here, you see number Gimel on the bottom of this page, Rav Weiss wants to know if we assume that the Zman Chiyuv is what's going to generate the mitzvah, and until the Zman mitzvah there's no Chiyuv, then certainly in this case I should buy lulav and not tefillin. Even though you might argue, well, tefillin is a greater mitzvah than lulav, it's the whole year round, it's tadir, it's holy. All of that is wonderful, but there's no Zman Chiyuv because I'm not going to be wearing tefillin. I wake up in the morning on Chol Moed and I have to take a lulav. I don't wear tefillin. So it's not the Zman Chiyuv. I don't have to worry about tefillin. After Yontif, I'll buy myself tefillin, hopefully, if I can get the funds together. But right now, I don't have the mitzvah of tefillin. I have the mitzvah of lulav. Everybody got it?
Yeah.
So this he quotes here on page Tuf Kuf Tzadi Dalit. If I can find it. Yeah, do you see how Pshita? You might want to underline this on Tuf Kuf Tzadi Dalit, which is the third or the fourth pages. He says Pshita le Dili Olam Yesh Lahaktim. What's Lahaktim mean? Kedima mitzvah shehigias mana lezusha dayin lo higias mana. Underline those words. Kedima comes to the mitzvah that right now I'm obligated in. I don't have to worry. Here's a famous question. I don't know if you ever heard this question. Let's say, who remembers on what calendar date I have to fast in Tishrei? In the month of Tishrei.
None.
Say it again.
Gimel?
Gimel, correct. On the third day, that's called what? Tzom.
Yeah.
Everybody, Tzom Gedalia. Right? Now, what happens if a person is ill, and the physician says if you fast on Tzom Gedalia, you will not be able to fast a week later on what? Yom Kippur.
You don't have that obligation yet.
Correct. Excellent. Most of the poskim say fast on Tzom Gedalia, which is only a rabbinic fast, even though it means you'll have to forfeit the great holy fast of Yom Kippur. Because right now you're obligated in the mitzvah of Tzom Gedalia, not in the mitzvah of Yom Kippur.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
Really?
You know, if I would wake up, even a Talmud Chacham in the middle of the night and say, well, should I fast on Tzom Gedalia? Knowing well, then I'll have to forfeit Yom Kippur. I'll be eating on Yom Kippur. He would say, you're crazy. But according to what we're saying now, that in Dinei Kediva, the mitzvah that now is obligatory, that's the one that gets preference and precedence, then I take Tzom Gedalia a week before Yom Kippur. That's what I have to say. Okay, now we look at Boy Minei Rav Chiyuv. Everybody have the place? We're on Tuf Kuf Tzadi Dalid, and you may want to check off this paragraph, Boy Minei Rav Chiyuv. Want to check it off so you know that this is an important paragraph for us. Okay. Now, at the time that the Beis Hamikdash stood, there was a daily korban, twice daily. What was it called?
Tamid.
Tom. Excellent. On Yontif, there's an extra korban beyond the Tom. What's that called? Musa. Excellent. So the Gemara Menachos, what daf is it on? Mem Tes wants to know the following. Are you with me, guys? They brought the korban tongue of that day. But now they have to bring a korban musaf. But they don't have funds for tomorrow's korban tummy.
Oh well.
Did you follow? So we have the following choice. We can use the limited funds that we have to buy to obtain a korban musaf, but then we have to forfeit tomorrow's korban tamid, or the other option is that we forfeit today's korban musaf in favor of tomorrow's korban tamid.
You don't have an obligation for tomorrow's time again.
Correct. And yet the Gemara says, Tadir v'she'eno tadir, tadir koder. You mentioned it before. It's a pellet. You know, your paradigmic case of tadir is the korban tamid.
Yeah, fine.
Kishmo kenu, it's tamid, it's tadir. Take a look at the Gemara. Boy mine Reb Chia. Now, what is boy mine? Are you gentlemen familiar with the Talmudic Aramaic? What is boy mine?
Question.
No, boy mine means he asked the question. Boy mine Reb Chia bar Oven Reb Chizda. Reb Chia bar Oven asked Reb Chizda, Tzibur she'en lehem tmidim umusafim. They don't have enough money for both what? Tmidim and musafim. Eze mehem. What's the next word? Kodem. What's kodem?
First.
Kedima. Kedima. Remember, I want you to learn that word kedima. Hechidami. What's the case? If we need to buy today's tamid or today's korban musaf, pshita, which is going to get precedence between tamid and musaf of today? Tamid, because tamid has what? Tadir v'sheinu tadir tadir kader. Ella, but what's the suffix? Tmidim dilav machar. You want to underline those two words? Tmidim dilav machar. I need to buy tomorrow's tamid. I already brought today's tamid. Umusafim da'idna. What's da'idna? Today. Tmidim adifi. I should save the money and not buy the musaf, but rather use it for tomorrow's tamid. Why? Shekain tadir. We have a din in kedima. That what gets for first preference?
The one that goes in.
Tadir. Tadir means something that's it's constant.
Is that why Shabbos wine comes before Hanukkah candles?
The Gemara does seem to say what he said, yeah. But it's very difficult because I don't know, the Rishonim don't say it that way. The Gemara seems to say it that way, but the Rishonim say something totally different. Okay, that's a different issue. O Dilma Musafim Adifi Dehavile Mekudosh. So the Rishonim learn that the word Mekudosh means that it's immediate. It's right now. Today is the day of Kedusha that requires Musaf. But there was one side in the Gemara, and the Gemara doesn't come to any definite conclusion right now, that you should use the money for Tamid. Why? Because it's Tadir. But which korban tamid? Today's korban tamid or tomorrow's korban tamid? Underline. Underline it. El tmidim dilu macha. Can you see those three words? That's why we do these photocopies. So this you'll have for the rest of your life. If you keep it safe. So Rav Asher Weiss is totally confused by this Gemara. We just finished saying that Kedima goes to the mitzvah that's obligatory now. Tomorrow's Tamid is not obligatory. Why would the Gemara think, therefore, that I should spend the money on tomorrow's Tamid, forfeiting today's Muslim? I don't know. He tries to answer this question, but honestly, none of his answers are very good.
So if it's about to be Hanukkah and 3 days into Hanukkah is Shabbos and you don't have candles or wine, which do you do first? Because you need to buy, because Hanukkah is coming sooner, but Shabbos happens more frequently.
Yeah. See, the thing is like this. let's make a premise that wine for Kiddush is only Dirabban, which is a gigantic assumption. Everybody assumes that, but it's really not so. But anyway, if Ner Chanukah is Dirabbanon and Yain for Kiddush is Dirabbanon, and it's already Chanukah, but it's not yet Shabbos, then the fact that now is the Zman Achi of Chanukah, but then what happens when we get to Friday?
Why?
Because Friday already I'm obligated in Ner Shabbos. Right? When do we light Ner Shabbos? On Friday. So now I have two mitzvahs d'Rabbanan that are vying for that limited funds. Do I buy shemen for Ner Chanukah or do I buy yayin for Kiddush? So again, if you're on the first day of Chanukah, no question about it. If we assume that Kiddush on yayin is d'Rabbanan, you'll buy Ner Chanukah.
Even though Shabbos is more frequent, more Tavi.
Again, it depends who you're asking. If you're asking Rav Weiss or you're asking the Gemara in Menachos, the Gemara in Menachos seems to assume that even though you've already brought the Tavi today, and it's not yet the Zman Chiyuv for tomorrow's Tavi, nevertheless, Tavi v'shena Tavi Koder. But Rav Weiss says it doesn't make any sense, because according to everything that we established, you will not spend the money for tefillin on Chol Hamoed, even though tefillin is a greater mitzvah than lulav. Tefillin is Doraisa, lulav during Chol Hamoed is only D'Rabbanan, but right now you're obligated in lulav.
Maybe it's just the Korban Tamid.
That's possible. Maybe it's a din miyuchad, a din mesuyam in Tavi. And that would be my inclination, but I have to prove it. You can't just throw it out there. Now, this business that I mentioned to you, and I want you to know names here, because names are important, that if it's a question of buying a lulav or buying tefillin on Chol Hamoed, then you buy the lulav. That is the position, I don't know if anybody who argues with it, but the one who came up with this idea is Rabbi Akiva Eger. So I'd like you to write that name down because he is the giant and the genius of Ashkenazic greats for the last, 3 centuries.
What's his name?
Rabbi Akiva Eger.
Eger.
Eiger, Eiger.
So which one did he say?
He was the one who said that you forfeit the mitzvah of tefillin for tomorrow, because right now it's Chol Hamoed, and rather you buy lulav. Because in Dinei Kedima, the mitzvah of Zman Achiyuv is kodem to the mitzvah that's tomorrow. It's Zman Achiyuv.
So which source says you?
So that's what we debate. What?
Which source says you should do the Tamid one? That's the Gemara.
The Gemara vacillates back and forth, but the Gemara has one strong side to say that you buy tomorrow's Tamid, forfeiting today's Musaf, which Rav Weiss says just doesn't make any sense.
So besides that one thing, tomorrow's Tamid forfeiting today's Musaf, separate from that, the general rule is, if you have two things, one is Zman Chiyuv now, the other one's not now, you do the one that's now, but if you have two mitzvahs and the Zman Chiyuv is the same time, then you do the one that comes tomorrow.
Or the one that's Doraisa as opposed to the ones that's D'Rabbanan. There may be other, factors that come into consideration.
So then what's this thing here at the end where you're buying tomorrow's Tamid rather than today's Musaf? That's just,
We don't have it as
it's fully just like
the Gemara that has to be worked out. All right, has to be ironed out.
Okay, so we're getting through it.
I don't know how to iron it out for you. Rav Weiss tries. I don't know.
So if we had the base of
He makes a lame.
if we had the base of yesterday, would we hold like Alamesa?
I don't know. You have to look in the postum. Okay, Rabbi. So now I photocopied for you another source from a sefer called Gvuras Yitzchak. Did I mention this to you? Rav Yitzchak Zorotskin from Lakewood Yeshiva. Again, Lakewood Yeshiva, not the big yeshiva in Lakewood, but a very, very big yeshiva, but not the biggest in Lakewood.
BMG or a different one?
Not BMG. He's got his own yeshiva. I was told he has over 1,000 students. That's not bad. BMG maybe has, I don't know, 5,000 students. Who knows? Now, the trouble with the photocopies is twofold. Number one, I have my notes all around the text, so see if you can see the text and without paying attention to my notes. Here's 2 copies here. And the second drawback is that I was having trouble with the photocopy machine. So I put it on these very large pages. So
Or we have one more. You have it.
see how many, I don't know exactly how many I made, but
They're the same size, the rest of it.
okay.
Or you guys okay? Or
I'll actually share a few values or you can.
we'll share, I'll do, you two share.
Okay.
Which I can split up and get.
Okay, Rabbi, so what we're about to embark upon, we don't have that much time, but maybe 5-10 minutes, is very, very exciting for me. I just love it. There's a mitzvah called V'hadarta Pnei Zaken, which means that I have to stand up, full posture, in front of a chacham, a chacham. You with me so far? Because the word zaken in the Torah, according to Torah Shebal Peh, is not a function of age, but rather of chachma, how wise he is. Now, exactly who qualifies as a chacham for this mitzvah, I don't know. That's complicated. Does he have to know Kol Torah Kula? What does he have to know? Anyway, now, supposing I see a chacham all the way yonder, do I have to get up for him? No. When do I have to get up for him?
When he's within 4 hours.
When he comes within a circumference, a radius, I guess you call it, of Daled Amos. Okay. Now, what happens? Listen to this. Well, believe there's a sugya chas about this. If I see the chacham at a distance, and I know he's coming, but I close my eyes before he reaches Daled Amos. So the Gemara says, why would a person do such a thing? What are we dealing with Rishoyim or with evil people that don't want to fulfill the mitzvahs?
Not dressed with snooze.
What do you say?
Maybe he's not dressed with snooze, so you don't want to see him.
Well, that's a different question. There's a whole sugi about whether you stand up for a chacham in a base haberchas, in a bathhouse.
Yeah.
A whole, but that's not for us now. I mean, I can't take on the whole thing in one shot. But let's see if we can figure this out. Okay. Now, what page is it on? Because I have the original.
Shinayin Beis.
Shinayin Beis. Okay, Shinayin Beis. Here it is. Now, because of all my writings, my chicken scratch, upon the expression, I'll tell you to go down on the right side 5 lines. You see what it says Uminayin? It's in a little bit bold print, Uminayin. Right column, 5 lines down. Uminayin shelo yachsim einav min hachacham. How do we know that you're not allowed to close your eyes, kidei shelo yirehu, so you won't see him ad shelo yamad bipanim, so you won't have to stand in front of the chacham. So the Beis Yitzchak has a whole discussion here about when the chiyuv emerges. Does the chiyuv emerge when you see him, or when you know he's coming? And he says that Afkamina is going to be a summa. Anybody know what a summa is?
Blind.
What?
Blind
A
person.
blind person. If the obligation is generated by Re'iyah, then a blind person is not obligated.
Right.
But Rav Sorotskin assumes that a blind person is obligated. Why? He doesn't see the chacham. He knows the chacham is there. Somebody gives him a nudge, whispers in his ear, the chacham is here. So that means that Yediyah is Machayim. Talmud Lomer v'yoresa melokech. The pasuk says, "V'adarta pnei zaken." It says, "V'nei sevetokum v'adarta pnei zaken." The Aresa Melokecha. What's the Aresa Melokecha? Fear of God. What does fear of God have anything to do with this?
Because that was the original commandment, wasn't it?
What do you mean? What do you
At the
mean?
very beginning, you were saying how fear of God comes from the commandment.
The general.
The fear of God is the Dean's 12.
Yeah, no, I think when listen to me, Rabosa. Again, I'm cutting corners here because we don't have that much time. But as a general rule, whenever it says the Aresa Melokecha, listen carefully, the Gemara derives from that God sees through you. So you might not be afraid of anybody else because you fooled the world, but you can't fool him with a capital H. Do you follow me? So that's called the Aresa Melokecha. So you're going to fool the world, and you can say, well, I didn't know the Chacham was there. My eyes were closed. The Aresa Melokecha. God knows that you're playing games over. So the Gvuras Yitzchak asks the following question. If we assume that Yediyah, knowledge of the fact that the Chacham is coming, is enough to generate the Chiyuv, then how could it entertain anyone's mind that he's allowed to close his eyes and not stand up for the Chacham? He's violating the mitzvah. It's a bittul mitzvah because he knows the Chacham is coming.
But he knows exactly when he'll enter the race.
Exactly, like he knows.
What?
He knows
He will know
exactly
exactly when the mitzvah starts to apply.
He knows the Chacham's on his way, but he won't know exactly when the mitzvah starts to apply. He also doesn't know if the Chacham last second might change his mind and turn around.
Wait. You're saying too much at once. Wait, let's go slow. Again, I'm gonna repeat it, and you tell me where you disagree. If we give the following assumption that the obligation is generated by Yediyah, right? I know the Chacham is on his way. Or let's put it even in a more profound way. If the Torah commands me to guarantee that I'll fulfill the mitzvah, he hasn't gotten to my 4 amas yet, let's say, right?
Yeah.
But the Torah says, do what you have to do so that you can fulfill the mitzvah, right? And we said that if you don't buy lulav before Yom Tov, you won't be able to buy lulav. So if you know the Chacham is coming, forget about the Aresa Melokecha. I don't need the pasuk Aresa Melokecha. We have a general rule that a person has to do everything in his power to guarantee that what? That when the Zman HaChiyuv emerges, he will be able to fulfill that Chiyuv. If he goes ahead and closes his eyes, then he makes it impossible for himself when the Chacham finally reaches the Daled Amos to stand up and fulfill the mitzvah of Badarta P'nei Zakeh.
So it's another Dean's 12.
In other words, again, what Rav Yitzchak Sorotzkin is asking, a profound question. If not for the pasuk v'Aresa Melokecha, the Gemara is saying you'd be allowed to close your eyes. Do you follow me? It's only Talmud Lomar because the Torah added 2 words, v'Aresa Melokecha. That's how we know that he's not allowed to close his eyes. So Rav Yitzchak Sorotzkin asked the following question: forget about v'Aresa Melokecha. Of course, he's not allowed to close his eyes because Yediyah. Again, if you hold that Re'iyah is the Machayev, then Rav Sorotzkin has even a more profound question. Because if Re'iyah is Machayev, well, guess what? He didn't see the Chacham within Daled Amos. And a Summa would be potter from this mitzvah. So, it occurs to my mind that's why I need v'Aresa Melokecha. Because if not for Aresa Melokecha, you would say that Re'iyah is Machayev, and since he closed his eyes, you see, let's say you're in Yerushalayim on Erev Pesach. Right? Let's say on Yudalid B'Nisan before the Shastiyuv of Korban Pesach, you're in Yerushalayim. And then you pick up and you pack out and you take a long trip up to Tzfat. So that means you're b'derech rechoka, you're potter for the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. Are you allowed to do that?
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically, yes. So that's why I need the Eresvel Kecha to tell me that even though you're not obligated in the mitzvah until the Chacham reaches what? Daled Amos, and then I have the Re'iyah. So I can now close my eyes before the Chacham reaches Daled Amos, in which case I packed out to Tzfat before the time for Korban Pesach, so I never was obligated in the mitzvah. Now I need the Eresvel Kecha. But if, on the other hand, I assume that Yediyah is Machayev, I don't need the Re'iyah. All I have to know is somebody taps the other deck and say the Chacham was on his way. Then why do I need the Eresvel? And the Gvuras Yitzchak comes to a radical conclusion. He says that because of the pasuk the Eresvel Kecha, I derive the conclusion that we got regard to every single mitzvah, I have to guarantee that I'll be able to fulfill the mitzvah. In other words, okay, I'll introduce. With this, we'll conclude. I'll just introduce another terminology called a binyan av. Have you ever heard that phrase? Want to write it down?
Yeah.
Binyan av. Yeah, binyan av is a rule that's derived from a specific case. So we generalize that rule. So according to Rav Sorotsky, when it says v'yareis v'elkecha, it's generalizing a new rule that you have to do everything in your power to make sure that when the chiyuv emerges, you'll be able to fulfill the chiyuv. Okay, gentlemen, I wish you good Shabbos. And keep in mind that the mitzvah is not only to be mafresh maser, but also to make a bracha on the maser. And that's it. Next week, I think we meet on Wednesday and Thursday. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Tuesday, I forget where you're.
We're gonna Wadi Kel.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what you're doing. You want
Monday,
to
no?
Hmm?
For Monday?
Tuesday.
Sunday?
Okay. Anybody comments, questions? Shut this off.
We have 7:45 is the
Thank you. Want to
night sitter.